Smack Studio in New York City. Here is Steve Malzberg.
I think with a different administration, one that was a Republican administration, this story would be a national obsession. And instead, it's getting coverage here and a few other places, but it really deserves a lot more questions.
You're agreeing.
Absolutely. If they were targeting Democratic groups and had been a Republican president, I think it would be in the front pages of every newspaper for weeks.
Yeah, what an amazing declaration coming on MSNBC of all places. Welcome back. Joining us now, Tim Graham, our friend and Director of Media Analysis at the Media Research Center. Hello, Tim.
Hello.
You know, you guys have documented, as you do such a great job documenting all these wonderful things, you've documented the lack of IRS coverage over the many, many months. In fact, it was built up to approaching almost 100 days before, I think, last Friday, when finally the networks acquiesced after Paul Ryan, lost his cool, rightfully so, with the IRS commissioner. And it was revealed, and this was a day after the revelation that Lois Lerner had thrown away the hard drive. That wasn't even news. So to hear Mark Halpern, of all people, who did tell me once that there were death panels and then felt he had to backtrack, to admit that if this was a Republican administration, all hell would be breaking loose, that's pretty big.
Yeah, I think it's obvious, but it is nice to have them admit that. I think that if you had gone back to, let's say, 8 years ago, and we discovered that all the George Soros-funded left-wing outfits were trying to defeat George W. Bush in 2004 were all denied their tax exemptions by Bush's IRS, and suddenly they said all the emails had been destroyed, the ones that the Congress wanted. I think we understand that would be a massive story. And that's, there's lots of stories in the Bush years you could look at that would seem pretty tiny. I would just nominate them firing 7 U.S. attorneys, which they made an enormous scandal out of that. And of course, Bill Clinton came into office and fired
much more,
and they didn't even cover it.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember that. Now you're bringing back all these memories. Oh my goodness! But you're absolutely right. Do you think that this is going to have legs going forward, or just where it's already had legs?
I never presume, 6 hours from now or 2 days from now, they're still going to cover it. I do think that the things that we've learned are serious and newsworthy, and we'll keep trying to insist where it's newsworthy to say they should be covering it. But yeah, it is good. Obviously, the Republicans having hearings and yelling at the IRS commissioner a little bit did work. And I think what really worked here is what Paul Ryan said, which was the IRS wouldn't let the average taxpayer get away with, oh, I'm sorry, I lost 2 years of tax records.
Yeah. Everybody
understands that that's what's wrong here. And that's what I think compelled them, sort of shamed them into giving it some attention.
Yeah, no, very, very, very true. That brought it home, and that related it to the average American. All right, let's move on. I saw your piece, and I was so glad that you wrote it. The president and Michelle Obama gave an interview to Parade magazine, and he put forth this myth, and that his mother was the sole or primary breadwinner of the family, when, as you point out, his very successful grandmother played a huge part in raising him and providing for him, correct?
Well, look, it's the idea that they're trying to sell, which is, we understand that he had a single mother. The problem with the scenario is that he didn't live with the single mother a lot of his childhood. He spent a lot of his childhood in Hawaii while his mother was in Indonesia. So yeah, what Parade tried to do, the way they sold it in this Sunday magazine that goes to newspapers all over the country, was, just like Obama's mother, there's a lot of families where the sole breadwinner is the mom. And that's the sort of thing where liberals get very upset at the idea that someone would ask for Obama's birth certificate. That was never a good question. That was established. But there's all kinds of these details of Obama's upbringing that they regularly mangle to make a political point.
Absolutely, absolutely. And he's repeated this, although he has tempered it. I heard one interview, although he gave so many over the weekend, he might have repeated it over and over without giving a qualifier. He did bring up his grandmother in one of the interviews over the weekend. We were talking about the single mom issue and all that. But then there's Michelle. you know, Michelle had a sweetheart of a job at a hospital in Chicago, and I read them belly aching about, you know, how women aren't good negotiators, women don't make enough money, and me, and I'm thinking, what? And you pointed that out in the piece.
Yeah, they had basically suggested that Michelle Obama was a role model because she asked for more money. Well, in reality, she was paid 6 figures to work at the University of Chicago Hospital, got the job basically as her husband was heading into the U.S. Senate. Then suddenly, her salary gets tripled. And, you know, oh, what a great negotiator you are. Well, again, part of this is he was a U.S. senator. He had the ability to bring government money to this hospital. You know, and again, this would be the sort of thing that would be a news story. But what happens is, instead of that, the news media are so credulous that they turn around and sell this as, oh, Mrs. Obama, she's so savvy.
Yeah. Yeah, and I remember that. I remember a lot of scrutiny on talk radio at the time, of which I was participating in, over that job and over the tripling of the salary, and what did she do to earn that? What changed with the job? How did that happen? And you know, and really, from my memory, nobody could really come up with any justification for that kind of salary for that kind of job and the tripling of the salary. It's not like she took on triple the responsibility. So yeah, and it did coincide with him entering the U.S. Senate. You're absolutely right. All right. Well, good job in a great piece, and you can check out that, folks, at newsbusters.org and check out Tim Graham's piece there. All right. The New York Times has themselves a brand new writer, a new reporter, and very curious history for that person.
Well, maybe they don't expect that these things come out, but the Washington Post reported on the New York Times in this case, and that is they have a new reporter/intern who uses the byline Theodore Schleifer, known as Teddy on Twitter, and he has, in 2012, he worked for the Obama campaign as an intern in the speechwriting shop, and has several other jobs interning in the communications area for Democratic politicians, including the governor of Delaware. And, you know, it's just one of those things now where you can rotate directly in from the Obama-Biden campaign to being a quote-unquote objective, you know, reporter intern at the New York Times. And just to hear them try to suggest, well, we don't see how this represents an appearance issue, as they send this guy down to Mississippi to report on the Republican primary there. Obviously, I think Republicans will look at that sort of a background and say, I don't think we're getting an objective reporter on this campaign. And they just don't care about appearances anymore. I think that's the sad thing.
Yeah.
You know, everything from Chelsea Clinton and her $600,000 salary to George Stephanopoulos, et cetera, there's just no real dividing line between Democratic politics and the so-called objective liberal media.
Where do you think Carney's going to wind up?
Well, you'll remember, yeah, Carney was at Time Magazine for 20 years, and I think that, or almost 20 years. So I'm guessing he's not going to go directly back into liberal media. He was a print guy, he wasn't a TV guy.
Right.
He'd be a little bit like an Ari Fleischer, that he'll get a nice consulting job and he'll show up on TV to sort of stick up, you know, be that pundit for Obama's legacy.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, he won't go back to print. He might write a book. I'm sure he'll give plenty of speeches, and TV's the way for him. All right. So there was this great march, the March for Marriage, a pro-traditional marriage march in Washington, and of course, that's not news either.
Well, I think that the liberal media has a problem with the idea that conservatives can hold a protest. We see this every year with the March for Life on the abortion issue in every January. And a lot of times, the New York Times simply decides that they're not going to cover it. Hundreds of thousands of people can march in January weather in Washington, D.C., and the New York Times says, And what's funny is you can, you know, I've written about how 4 illegal aliens marching from Miami to Washington, they did that story, but tens of thousands of people marching for abortion, no. In this particular case, thousands of people come to Washington to march for marriage between a man and a woman, and the New York Times says that's not a story. Instead, we're going to lead the national section with the Presbyterian Church USA saying yes to gay marriages. So the pro-gay story is news, And what they call the anti-gay story is something they're just not going to do.
It couldn't be more blatant. It couldn't be more obvious, and it really doesn't seem to affect them. But we got about 30 seconds. I guess they've weathered the storm with the the female problem they had, shall we call it?
Which one now?
Well, their editor who got bounced.
Oh yes, with Jill Abramson.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, it's the same old thing. The New York Times is the same old thing. That if it pleases the liberals, it's news. If it pleases the conservatives, who heard? Did something happen?
No. Absolutely not. Nothing happened. All right, Tim, always great to see you and speak with you, sir.
Thanks.
Tim Graham, ladies and gentlemen, Director of Media Analysis at the Media Research Center, here on the Steve Malzberg Show and newsbusters.org. Just a great place to document all the media bias, and they do document it, believe you me. Coming up next, Give Me 5 on the Steve Malzberg Show.